Peace, family. Brother Rizza Islam here. We are back at it again, where I can slow down and take my time. Because it's my show, and I'm still getting to learn and realize that I have my own show. So, this episode will be the first of many. This will be part one of this particular arena that I'm going to go into. But as I'm doing these episodes now, I'm going to go in a whole lot more and much deeper. The first 3 episodes of my show were really just to get warmed up, but I'm really about to go in. So on this episode, I just want us to start looking at, certain things happening in the world as it pertains to mental health. Now, I'm not going to go in the direction you think I'm going to go in, unless you've been following me for quite some time, which means you know exactly where I'm going to go. So, first thing, you're seeing a lot of people, right? We're hearing a lot about people as it pertains to mental problems and trauma, and the world does have trauma. All of us have a certain level of trauma, whether if you grew up in a house that didn't have both parents, or you didn't have any of your parents, or you grew up in foster care, or you just had a broken circumstance. You grew up in an environment you didn't like, whether if it was drugs involved, if it was random people coming in and out of the house, if it was gunshots, gang activity, you name it. I've been through that. And many of you have been through this as well, so you get where I'm coming from. So trauma does exist. Mental problems do exist. And this is where the subject becomes quite touchy, because we've been lied to yet again as it pertains to another area that's affecting us as a people. What do I mean by this? The area of mental health, and particularly how psychiatry becomes involved in the area of mental health. Do people have mental problems? No doubt. Do people have different issues that they experience that we're dealing with, nervousness and traumatic responses to things because of negative circumstances or negative experiences that we have had in life? Absolutely, absolutely. However, when it comes to who should you trust with your mental health, who should we trust? Who should we go to? Who should we talk to? Who should we have the conversations with? What are the methods? What are the actual solutions that we should be involved in? Is it just drugs? Should it be drugs at all? And what the hell is the foundation of this in the first place? When did this stuff start? Where did it come from? What were the original methods under the foundational principles of this thing that we call mental health? So I was looking at a story of our brother, a brother who was a DJ on the Ellen DeGeneres show, and he was 40 years old. So I believe it was earlier this week. The brother took his life. He was only 40, again, black man. And you don't know the signs, when it comes to a person dealing with certain issues. This is a fact. I understand that. And black men taking their lives is something that is heavily on the rise right now and has been for quite some time. It's a steady upticking trend where black men have been taking themselves out, along with, of course, white men and natives and different people of different demographics. So it is a very terrible circumstance. However, this one was very questionable to me, a little fishy. Well, damn near all of them are. But this one in particular was something that, it made me look at it like, well, he was 40 years young. He was just making TikTok videos and different dance videos with his significant other. I'm not sure if that's his wife or girlfriend. She's Caucasian. I got to toss this in there because this is a factor for us as black men when it comes to trusting, and particularly white women, because of the historical connection that we've had, especially when it comes to the plantation all the way down. Hasn't been a good thing. So it always comes into the equation. We just have to look at things from an intellectual perspective here. So as I look at all of this, number one, he went to a motel. He took himself out and they closed the case in less than 48 hours. I don't understand that. He worked on the Ellen DeGeneres show, which is very fishy in itself because of the type of people that Ellen has been around and has hung around, and Ellen herself, and the different types of people who she's brought on. And there's a lot of fishiness going on in that pond of people as well. So all of these things kind of make me question, because after that happened, you see this huge amount of love coming out for the brother, which is beautiful. Then on the other hand, you see this huge push for taking antidepressant drugs. This is where I'm going with this in particularly. Should people get help? Yes. Should you find somebody to talk to? Absolutely. Should you go somewhere and have a good conversation, get exercise, get some other types of therapy with the right people who you love, you trust, and who really want to help you and see you do well? Absolutely. But should you be placed on drugs that arguably are worse than the condition that you are in? And if you are on these psychotropic drugs, just stay with me. Just stay with me, because we're going to delve into this. So that is a circumstance that was very questionable for me. I will say, just to open it up, as it pertained to his circumstance, Tyler Perry came out and showed support and talked about how he battled with suicidality and all of those things. Rosie O'Donnell came out and said that she's been taking antidepressants, I believe she says, since 1989. Well, that made a lot of sense when it comes to certain things that Rosie O'Donnell has come out and talked about. And she said she took it in response to the Columbine shooting, where two individuals, one by the name of Eric Harris, another one by the name of Dylan Klebold, shot up a school, killed 13 people. Interestingly enough, Eric Harris was on Luvox, another drug prescribed to him. And these drugs are very dangerous because they increase the likelihood of suicidal thoughts, homicidal thoughts, and tendencies. Over 50% of all people who have committed these mass shootings in America, in particularly, have been on more than one, usually, or at least one form of psychotropic drug, literally. So these are things we have to bring into question. So let's look at the foundation here of this whole area when it comes to the field of mental health in America, or overall with how mental health and mental healing has been manipulated from the original purpose and how it was supposed to be into this sick, twisted industry that makes billions while presenting zero cures to humanity. You do know where this starts. Now we have to look at something called Bethlehem Royal in London. If you don't know about Bedlam or Bethlehem Royal in London, this is where you start to see where scary movies are made from, where some of the ideas for scary movies, where you would see people chained up and who were going crazy and throwing up, and they were chained up like animals and all that kind of nonsense, that really happened. The insane asylums became big business, starting over in Europe and then going all throughout the world, where people would literally be chained like animals, and they would charge, starting with a man by the name of William Batty, who was the president of Royal College of Physicians. And this man charged an admission, like you go into a movie theater, to let people come in and look at, oh, look at all the crazy people chained up. These people are crazy. Wow, look at that crazy person. Oh, look at that crazy person. Oh, look at that crazy person. Whoa, that's crazy. This is real. Some of you are like, this can't be real. It is real. And again, that's where it started, and it skyrockets it into multiple locations all across the planet. This is something that made William Batty very rich, and it made a lot of people very, very rich. From the biological perspective, when it comes to psychiatrists, just so you know, and in the field of mental health, psychiatrists were not seen as legitimate doctors, because this is where you start going into the trust the science type of people who say trust the science, and the science is settled. Science is settled. We know the science. You don't know the science. You don't have a degree. You don't have a degree. You're not a psychologist. You're not a therapist. You're not a psychiatrist. Rizza, you don't know anything about this. Here's my main thing. If you don't know the history of your profession, you shouldn't be involved in it, because you will not be able to successfully be involved in it to the highest level. And I mean that because too many people speak without having the actual knowledge or the history or the foundation of what it is they're involved in. So when people like us who actually study the history, you don't need to be a psychiatrist in order to know the history of psychiatry, just like you don't need to be a psychologist in order to know the history of psychology. But you better know it if you decide to go into that field respectfully. So they had to become legitimate doctors because they were not seen as legitimate doctors. So what did they have to do? Well, when you're a doctor, you deal in medicines, you deal in viruses, you deal in things affecting the body, some kind of malady, some kind of pathogen, something that's going into the body, making it ill or sick, right? Well, they came up with the biological circumstance. There's something happening inside of this person from a chemistry perspective. There's something happening in their body. There's some kind of bacteria. There's a virus or something, because originally they just said it was demons in the person. You guys ever seen The Exorcist, Blair Witch Project, those kind of movies back then? It was always, oh, it's a demon coming out of this person. Same thing with Jesus when he was casting out demons metaphorically. And then there's other ways to look at certain things like this. That's where they would come at it from. There's demons in this person. So what do we need to do? Well, they came up with different methods. Let's go down to a man by the name of Benjamin Rush. If you don't know this man, I'm going to enlighten you about some things right about now. Benjamin Rush, known as the father of American psychiatry. A white man here in America who, from the University of Pennsylvania, he started to say things like, well, black people, for example, have a mental disease. Disease now, let's also remember this. When people say mental disease, because that's what it used to be called, then it transferred into mental disorder and or mental illness. I want you to be very critical when hearing these terms: mental disorder, mental disease, mental illness. In order for you to say disease or illness, there has to be something that can be measured or tested to determine a biological reality. There's something there, some bacteria, virus, something that's in the body that you can measure and you can see it in a lab, right? You can see it in a lab test. There is no such thing as a depression virus, for example. So Benjamin Rush said black people have a mental disease called negritude. It causes their skin to be dark. It is a form of leprosy. And it is what makes them inferior to us. And it also makes them sick. So we need to be separated or segregated from them. Did you know that Benjamin Rush, known as the father of American psychiatry, said that negritude is something that infects black people, and we have to make sure we are not involved with them in any way, shape, or form, or else we will become infected. He said that the solution to this, because their skin is dark and it's just horrible, and oh my God, we don't want our skin to get dark and infected. So what is the solution? We need to expose the white meat. So he had different solutions to make our skin white, because it being dark meant we were crazy, but it being white meant we were sane. I wish I were lying. That's Benjamin Rush. Well, let's continue. Reason to mind you, if he's the father of American psychiatry, then anyone in the area of mental health or psychiatry, psychology, a therapist, all of this is a part of the foundation of what you study. So you need to know this before parroting the updated version of the insane, disproven, unproven, nonsensical, idiotic things that they have us out here parroting. Let's continue to the next person here. You have someone by the name of, by the way, Benjamin Rush. The person's face, that face that you see on the seal of the American Psychiatric Association, is Benjamin Rush. And his face was enshrined on there from 1965. I believe now they have a brain, not like the big black brain though, but they have a brain on there as the image because of so many protests and people calling out the fact of how racist Benjamin Rush was. Next person, you have someone by the name of Dr. Henry Cotton. Now, Henry Cotton, same thing, biological perspective. People who are insane have a biological issue. There's something inside of their bodies causing them to be crazy, causing them to be different from us and for them not to think logically. But what was his solution to this mental problem? Because people are crazy. His solution, well, Dr. Henry Cotton said, well, there's a bacteria causing them to be insane, so we have to do things to remove body parts because these body parts were infected with this bacteria. So the first area they would go to were the teeth. So Dr. Henry Cotton and his assistants, nurses, would start extracting teeth out of the heads of people, right out of their mouth, one by one by one by one. Because they said this will help with their mental illness and they will become sane and they will no longer be crazy. Then he said, well, you know what? Since my patient isn't getting better, because people, I don't think would get better if you just start yanking teeth out of their mouth, right? He said, well, because they're not getting better, clearly, well, they've swallowed in their life because of drinking water or eating food or whatnot. So bacteria has moved down their esophagus. So, well, stomach has to go, a spleen has to go, an arm, a leg. You think I'm playing? Y'all really think I'm joking? This is really the foundation, the history of psychiatry, which goes into every area of what we call the field of mental health. This is why we shouldn't be so quick to call a person crazy. The very industry that we are using as the measuring stick, as the standard to determine who's sane and who's insane, who's crazy and who is not, is crazy as hell to begin with. Really crazy. Let's go on to the next person. In Leipzig, Germany, you had someone by the name of Wilhelm Wundt. This man here, very in particular individual, this is where things get, if they weren't already crazy, this is where things get interestingly wicked and evil. Wilhelm Wundt is a man who came up with this type of theory where man is an animal without a soul. He is a soulless organism to be trained like an animal. He is an animal and he must be trained like one. He has no soul, therefore he has nothing to live up to, nothing to look forward to. He is an animal. He must be trained like an animal. This is Wilhelm Wundt in Germany. Stick with me. These are psychiatrists, psychologists. These are the founding fathers, you could say, of this field. Interestingly enough, in 1882, there is a man that a lot of people quote, and I mean, I hear people quote him so much it blows my mind. His name is Friedrich Nietzsche. A lot of people quote Nietzsche as a philosopher, and they say all these different things that sound so enlightening and wonderful, and they do sound that way, but read a little more about what Nietzsche has said. For example, one quote of Nietzsche is, quote, "God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him," end quote. Nietzsche. Next person. You have someone here by the name of Ivan Pavlov. Some of you know about Ivan Pavlov, Pavlov's dogs, Pavlovian conditioning. Ivan Pavlov, another individual who actually learned a lot of what he learned from Wilhelm Wundt because he was studying him. These are now the people that we call behaviorists. And now you're going into the area of mental health called behaviorism. So these are the people now who started to shape and control human behavior. These are the people that the US government and other governments started to learn how to control populations, how people should move, how they should walk, how they should talk. The schooling system and the way the schooling system started to become set up was through behaviorism. So Ivan Pavlov, he had different things that he would use as it pertained to stimulus response mechanisms and, of course, condition reflex maneuvers. So, for example, when it comes to the dogs that he would use, he would have dogs come in and put them on the table. He would punch holes in their mouths to collect the amount of saliva that would be produced from their salivary gland whenever they would see meat or a treat that he would put on the table. So he'd put a treat on the table, he'd look at their response, and then he would take the treat away. Then he'd put the treat on the table and ring a bell at the same time. And he said, they're still producing saliva. Then he wouldn't put the treat on the table, but he would ring the bell as if he was going to put the treat on the table the same way he did before, and the dog would produce saliva the same way, as if there was a treat or meat still there. He called this a condition reflex, to learn how to control behavior. Even though things are not logically fitting together, he was able to manipulate the behavior of animals, and then they transferred that to human beings. Rizza, what do you mean? Mr. Pavlov not only did these experiments with dogs, he started to punch holes in the mouths of children. And he would measure their saliva and collect their saliva depending on how much they would produce, etc., to do the same exact thing. Conditioning of their behavior, seeing how they responded depending on what they were given with rewards at certain times and different things. And he would teach, for example, the rat in the maze. That came from the behaviorists. When it comes to pigeons playing ping pong, they would teach pigeons to play ping pong. That came from the behaviorists. They would do tests on monkeys and tests on babies. All of this came from the behaviorists, and two in particular that we need to mention. One is a man by the name of John Watson, possibly one of the most famous behaviorists to ever do it. This man said that you should look at the child like the ox you slaughter. John Watson, very critical, evil individual as it pertains to behaviorism, was one of the chief architects in this field of mental health to control the behavior of children mainly, and then adults as well. Another individual is someone by the name of B.F. Skinner. Boy, this is a very particular evil man here. All of them are crazy as hell, but in their mind, they're sane. In their mind, hey, it's science. Trust the science. The science is settled in their mind. This to them was sanity. So now we have to redefine what is sane and what truly is insane, because these insane things became sane so that sane people would think it was sane when they were really becoming conditioned to follow insane people to begin with. B.F. Skinner is another individual from Harvard. Hello, Harvard. You got some questions to answer, Harvard. How the hell did you let this dude get past? He better. All right. Harvard, this is what you produced. B.F. Skinner is a man who came up with something called operant conditioning. And now he is most famous for, out of many things, something called the Skinner box. Now, in this box, it's crazy because so many scary movies were made from these individuals and the things they were doing. So many scary movies. B.F. Skinner is a man who came up with the Skinner box, where inside of this box, he controlled everything, the temperature, the lighting, everything inside of this box. He put his own daughter in this box for nearly a year, and he was conditioning her in this box from the time in which he fed her to the temperature that he would control, from heat all the way down to cold. Everything he was doing was to condition, like an animal, like a chicken, like a pig, like an animal, a dog, a rabbit. B.F. Skinner with operant conditioning in the Skinner box. He learned a lot from Ivan Pavlov in the Pavlovian conditioning. Now, let's go over to someone by the name of, let's go over to the Judge Rottenberg Center. How many of you have been involved with or know somebody who has been in foster care or group homes and they have been committed to a psych ward? A lot of you know what I'm talking about, because this is the real side of life that a lot of people don't discuss, but it happens all the time. There was a center, like many others, called the Judge Rottenberg Center, where they were sending children to be conditioned, but they would say this is to help them, etc. But this was a center for the so-called bad children. And in this center, they got funding to put these electrodes on the arms of these boys. And if they acted up in any way, in a way that the people didn't like, in the way that those who worked at the center did not like, they could simply press a button and zap them on the arm. If they resisted, they'd zap them again. If they'd scream, they'd zap them again. And if they tried to kick because it was hurting so much, they'd strap them down and zap them again until they complied.
That hurts, that hurts, that hurts, that hurts, that hurts, that hurts, ow, that hurts. Okay, stop for real. Stop.
This is called torture. They called it treatment. They said, this is what you deserve. This is what you get. You need to comply. Let's continue. The Judge Rotenberg Center, which is a center like many, many, many others. For men who had sexual problems, meaning men who couldn't control their sexual urges and who would either try to force themselves onto women or try to force themselves around children in a sexual manner, there was something called the penile plethysmograph that would be strapped to these men. And the penile plethysmograph is something, I know some of y'all like, I like that. I actually like that. There's this machine, right? They would strap these men to this machine. And they would test them to see what aroused them. And depending on what aroused them, it would give them a shock. It's crazy. Now, I know some of the ladies out here like, you know what? Let's bring that back. Let's go ahead and bring that back. And I can't say that I would disagree with you. But I'm just going down the history so you can understand exactly what the whole field of mental health is about to a degree, because we're going to have to go into another part two, because this is a whole lot to look at. Let's fly over to Nazi Germany, for example, because a lot of people have this mix-up when it comes to history as well. Hell, did Hitler get it from America? Did America get it from Hitler? Did the Nazis get it from America? Did America inspire it to happen with the Nazis? What is it? What happened? Blah, blah, blah. A lot of people hide this history. We're going to go ahead and open it up. When it comes to the field of eugenics, in 1883, you had a man by the name of Francis Galton, who is primarily the founder of the eugenics movement. Then, of course, you have Charles Davenport when it comes to the American eugenics movement later on. But this man by the name of Francis Galton pretty much came up with eugenes, meaning good stock, good genetics, pure blood, pure bred, the best, the superior. Okay, which is blonde hair, blue-eyed. They are the superior race, right? This man said that only those who are superior should mate with one another. Only those who are superior should congregate, should do business, should build together, period. Everyone else is not necessarily life worthy of living. And if they do live, they should serve others. They should be those who serve those of us who are superior. All right? This is Francis Galton, Sir Francis Galton. He was knighted, by the way, in 1909. Interesting. And through that individual, of course, you have the eugenics movement, but in the eugenics movement, that inspired one Adolf Hitler. But not just Adolf Hitler. Have you heard of a man by the name of Alfred Plautz? Anyone heard of Alfred Plautz? What about Ernst Rudin? Ernst Rudin. Anybody? You? What about you? You ever heard of these two men? These two men were those who were inspired to come out with the first systems of racial hygiene, the first organizations dealing with racial hygiene, meaning to cleanse the world of those who are not of the superior, supreme race. And how can we systematically do this thing? Racial hygiene. Ernst Rudin is one of those who wanted to get rid of a large number of people. Same thing with Alfred Plautz. They looked at everyone who was crippled, everyone who was handicapped, everyone who was black, everybody who was Jewish in some senses of the word, everyone who they felt were gypsies and all these different kinds of people. They felt these people were not really the people who should be on the planet. But we got to find a way to get rid of them. We have to find an excuse to get rid of these human beings who we deemed as feeble-minded and undesirables. These are the terms they would use. Feeble-minded, undesirables, handicapped, those who are going to harm themselves. They are a danger to themselves and the rest of human society. They are a plague on the earth. They are a virus. These are the ways that they would describe us as a people and others as a people. And so Mr. Adolf Hitler, as it pertains to the sterilization movement in particularly, was inspired by California. Adolf Hitler gave the credit as it pertained to a lot of what he learned regarding sterilization to California because of how successfully California was utilizing sterilization techniques through the American eugenics movement on black women and brown women, primarily in the prisons of California, and black men as well. Think on that for a quick moment. Over 30 states in America had sterilization programs, well-funded, lots of money. It was going down all over this country. And that piece helped to inspire Adolf Hitler. Not only that, but there was a man by the name of Madison Grant. There's a book titled The Passing of the Great Race. This man, Madison Grant, an American eugenicist, was arguing the point that yes, we are the superior race, and the same old wash, rinse, repeat thing. Well, they should not be on this planet, and we are the supreme beings, and blah, 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 blah. This is what we should do. We should own this. Adolf Hitler started to say that this was his personal Bible, and that this is a book that he would live by, and the teachings that he learned from that he would live by. Again, being inspired by the American eugenics movement, going into the foundation of the principles of the field of mental health that many people fall into today, not realizing that this is the very history of what people are falling into. 1946, and before I even skip to that, when the people were murdered in Nazi Germany, it wasn't just 6 million Jews. It was roughly 11 million or more is what some of the numbers are saying. Included in that number were black folks. There were a lot of black people who were murdered in Nazi Germany. Again, let's make this very clear so we can understand that whole circumstance had a core understanding in it that these people were feeble-minded, undesirable, shouldn't be on this planet. They are a virus on the planet. And the field of mental health is what was behind it. It was that these people are not going to contribute to society. They're not going to contribute. Now, this is a part of history that most people don't even discuss because they make sure they wipe it clean from the history books, just like many things that we learn on the internet, because we didn't learn it in the schools. Very interesting. So as that happened, we know about 1946. And if you don't know about 1946, I'm talking about the doctor's trial at Nuremberg. These psychiatrists who were behind the Holocaust, who were behind the American eugenics movement, who have been behind the sterilization movements all across the planet, this group of psychiatrists were brought to stand trial as a result of what took place in Nazi Germany. Do you know that the Nuremberg trials, when it came to these Nazi scientists, that a group of them blamed it on just a few so that they could not be prosecuted, they could still operate, and many of them, after the trials, went back to work. Ernst Rudin went back to work. Many of these scientists fled to Africa. Ghana was a strong location for many of them. And they continued to do the same things that they were doing in Nazi Germany, in Africa, and in other parts of the world, even parts of America as well. Their last names were changed, and they were offered, you can say, asylum, some of them, but others didn't have to do it that way because they were deemed innocent because they blamed it on just a few. Hey, we weren't behind it, they were behind it. All kinds of nonsense. So this is a critical part when we talk about people and say people have a mental problem. Please be mindful of where this whole industry got its origin so that you can know how to truly approach this thing. And I'm going to wind it down to knock this piece out here. The German Association of Psychiatry, Psychotherapy, and Neurology in 1999. What year? 1999. Admitted, finally, this is 1999. I was 9 years old when this happened. They admitted, quote, psychiatrists controlled the selection of those to be killed in Nazi Germany, end quote. That was one of the things that they finally admitted to as it pertains to how the field of mental health contributed to the eradication of human beings. You have the American eugenics movement. If you don't know about Charles Davenport, if you don't know about one Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood, right? Y'all hear Kanye West talk about Planned Parenthood all the time. Planned Parenthood is a part of the American Eugenics Society, the American Eugenics Movement. But it was first called the American Birth Control League, talking about Planned Parenthood. Margaret Sanger was an honorary Klanswoman. Margaret Sanger was one of those who sincerely said, quote, "We do not want word to get out that we are trying to exterminate the Negro population," end quote. She was a heavy eugenicist, field of mental health. Let's continue. Benjamin Rush, as we mentioned earlier, talked about negritude, right? But did you know that negritude was used as a justification to help in the segregation of black people from white people? Y'all do know this, right? They thought we were diseased. It wasn't just, oh, black folk, oh, white folk. No. There were layers to this. They had advisors. They had people talking to them, telling them these people are diseased. You can't drink water with them. Don't use the restroom with them. You damn sure don't want to have sex with them because their disease is going to pass to you. Doesn't this make a little more sense now? Are there some dots connecting that makes you say, damn, I was wondering why they just hated us so damn much. I mean, what a passion. It's not just, yes, we have different natures, different cultures as a people, white and black for sure. But there was a difference when it came to the eugenics movement, when it came to the field of mental health and mental hygiene and how we operated, how they looked at the people. They're diseased. Benjamin Rush, again, had that kind of authority because he was known as the father of American psychiatry. So he was influencing politicians and policies and different things of that nature. You have another man by the name of Samuel Cartwright. Now, Samuel Cartwright, for those of you who don't know, I'm about to mention something that you are really going to be like, you got to be, okay, bro. Everything else so far has been crazy, right? All right. Remember how, and I'm going to mention Kanye because, again, this is another piece. He's one of those people who has become a victim of the field of mental health in some ways. I'm just going to mention that because that is a fact, and I'm going to drop a piece regarding that. Remember when he said slavery was a choice? Okay, well, on one hand, that is true. On one hand, let's not get this twisted. Don't turn it off now. Don't you turn it off. Come on now. You're too far with me. Don't turn it off. He said slavery is a choice, or was a choice. Well, Nat Turner made his choice. Okay, you with me now? Nat Turner made his choice. He said, hey, the Bible says something here about retribution and, and he who lives by the sword shall die by the sword and you reap what you sow and blah, blah, blah. Wait a minute. So he made his choice, Nat Turner. But when he said slavery was a choice, did you know that there is a psychiatrist by the name of Samuel Cartwright? Samuel Cartwright. This white man, he said that slaves who want to run away from slavery have a mental disease called drapetomania. Yo, I can't want to run away from slavery because that makes me crazy? Damn. Doesn't that bring a new understanding and a new level of understanding to why police operate how many of them do? Not every single one, but how too many police officers operate? Stop resisting, even though you're not resisting, you're sitting there like drinking something. Stop resisting. They have to say that because it's a whole liability thing and it's a trick on the camera so that they don't get fired for using excessive force. Yeah, we know what the hell you're doing, but whatever. Do you know you had a mental disorder, a mental disease, a mental illness if you wanted to run away from slavery? So while you're chewing on that and you're watching this with your friends and family at the house and you're laughing right now because you're like, I cannot believe it is a real thing. Crazy, very crazy. But what, Rizza, pray tell, was the solution to this? What was the damn cure for this one? What was the cure for this one? Benjamin Rush said the cure to negritude, right? The negritude, which is the disease that makes black people actually black. It's causing their skin to be dark. It's like leprosy. His solution was to expose the white meat, rip off their skin in different ways. P.S. I forgot to mention, Benjamin Rush was also known as the master bleeder. Why the master bleeder, Rizza? Because he said insanity is caused by having what? Too much blood on the brain, baby. Woo, this is crazy. These are some crazy as hell people. Y'all. Okay. Too much. How much is too much? How much is not enough? Too much blood on the brain is what insanity. It's what causes insanity. Benjamin Rush. You rushed to too many damn conclusions, sir. Good riddance to you. Now, let's fast forward back to the next point. What was the solution for Samuel Cartwright saying black people who have this disease that's called drapetomania who want to run away from slavery? What was his solution? They called it, quote, whipping the devil out of them, end quote. Rizza, wait a minute. Hold on. You mean to tell me that us being whooped, literally being whipped, back in those times, wasn't just because of the Bible? Wasn't just because of their manipulation of religion and Christianity and them saying that we were born to be servants and we were born slaves and we were born children of the devil and we should be whooped, etc., etc. But also they put another cut on it, a slant on it. They added a little bit. They stepped on it. Samuel Cartwright said whipping the devil out of them, because there must be a devil inside of them possessing them to want to run away from their massa. They love massa. Why you want to run away? You got a devil in you. Whip the devil out of him. This is a foundation in the history of psychiatry and really the field of mental health. This you? This science? This is you. We're almost done. What's my time like real quick? Yes! And it ain't 9 o'clock yet. Hell yeah. All right, come on. Keep that in. Now, let's see here. Whipping the devil out of them was that solution for Mr. Samuel Cartwright, correct? Can I give you a curveball here? Rizza, that wasn't legitimized. These are just individuals. This wasn't the whole field of psychiatry. These were just individuals. Really? Well, according to the American Journal of Psychiatry back then, they stated, quote, the alien ancestors of this race, black people, were savages and cannibals and are not ready for civilized society, end quote. So, you see how they flipped the history? When we taught them how to eat properly, how to bathe, how to cook, how to not have sex with your animals, and we're the savages. We're the cannibals. You know, y'all the cannibals. That's your history. You see how they flipped it on it? Crazy. But let's continue. By the way, that was I was quoting Dr. W.M. Bevis, psychiatry, Dr. W.M. Bevis from the American Journal of Psychiatry. Dr. Hendrik Verwoerd, and this is over in South Africa, the former prime minister of South Africa, studied eugenics as a psychology student in Germany. Would it surprise you that the apartheid in South Africa wasn't just racial and we don't like black people? Again, it wasn't just from what they looked at as a spiritual perspective. It wasn't just a military maneuver. It wasn't just because, we can't really get along. It wasn't just these things. All of those are factors, no doubt, absolutely factual. However, another piece to this was these people are diseased and we have to make sure we are separated from them. Just want to make sure we know the facts about certain pieces that are critical pieces, so that when we discuss things, we know really as much of this full thing as possible. You want to know as much about a thing before discussing it. At least I do. I want to know both parts. I want to know as much, if not all of it, the actual facts. Go to the root of a thing. You have these psych wards that were placed there, and one of those psychiatric facilities that they had, which was nothing more really than a concentration camp, talking about in South Africa. It was under a company called Smith, Mitchell and Company. The government was funding this torture camp, essentially, to where by the time they shut this thing down, roughly 22,000 people had died, and they had made upwards of $90 million. 1983, the World Health Organization. Who? The World Health Organization in 1983, because we're talking about science and we're talking about the manipulation of science in the field of mental health and mental healing, mental hygiene, and how they utilized and justified using mental health to eradicate human beings on a planet who they feel were not desirable and who were feeble-minded, etc. But in 1983, the World Health Organization stood up and did some very brave acknowledging of the truth, I would say. They stated, quote, psychiatry cultivated racism and certainly does have a parallel in the ownership and owning of slaves. Ownership and, pardon me, trading of slaves, end quote. Psychiatry, ownership and trading of slaves, psychiatry. The World Health Organization admitted this. Furthermore, they went on, let's go back to the 1960s really quick. They stated, this psychiatrist and American Psychiatric Association were saying that black activism and those who are black activists are driven by, quote, a schizophrenia and driven by abnormal, illogical fits of anger. So we're schizophrenic because we're telling you, stop shooting me. I just want to have my job. I'm a human being. I am a man. I am not an animal. Schizophrenic. Again, mind you, we're coming up now. If y'all notice, I went from the history, 1800s and prior till all the way up to where we are getting to now. I'm going to have to do a part 2 because there is so much that we have to go into with it. There is so much it bottles your mind when it comes to the field of mental health, when it comes to calling people crazy, when it comes to the drugs that they're prescribing to people, when it comes to the mental conditioning of the masses, and how people are being conditioned every day through television programming. This is why I wrote in my book, not a shameless plug, just a plug because it's my show. I can do what I want to. Chapter 8, mental health versus mental illness, fact versus fiction. I outline many of the things that I talked about here in this chapter. If you had this book, you would already be on point when it comes to many of these facts, because I had to put it in here to help look at the distinction between what really is crazy versus what they deemed to be crazy, to make you look crazy for fighting against crazy people. Because this system is truly insane, but it's doing its job. See, it's normal to it. It's crazy to us. But because it's crazy is normal, our normal is crazy to them. So they're trying to make us think that we're the crazy ones for wanting to stand up for what is right and fight against insanity and not be treated as animals, and trying to have logical discussions with an illogical system. So let me bring it to the end with these 3 points. 1974, I'm going to mention, Rizza, do you know any good psychiatrists? Yes, I do. Let me mention our late great sister, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. This is the ISIS Papers. If you do not have this book, the ISIS Papers, I recommend you get a copy of this book. Our sister is one of the most brilliant minds. And I mean sincerely, this black woman here, she was exposing something called the war of genetic annihilation and the fear that Caucasian men particularly have with being eradicated. And it's from an intellectual perspective. This has nothing to do with like another book, for example, called The Bell Curve. Richard Herrnstein, 1994. The Bell Curve was arguing an old eugenics idea, which is that the white man is the supreme race and that black people and Mexicans are genetically born inferior to white people. That book is a recommended read for psychology class students. And many of you watching this right now may have read that book. It was in your syllabus. You had to get that book as a part of your college class for psychology or psychiatry, even for some of you who are going to become therapists. That book, if you thoroughly read it, was horrific as it pertains to that specific arena, the superiority and inferiority, whites and blacks, blah, blah, blah. Well, the ISIS Papers not only counters that, but doesn't even try to counter it from a, superior, inferior. No, it goes to the heart of the matter. The black man and woman are the original mother and father of civilization. That's just the truth. We are the mother and father of all human beings on the planet. That's just the truth. But it's not oh, I'm going to strut around. Yeah, you know, I'm the superior supreme. No, it just is. We are the original. That's all. It's not I'm going to use this information to crush you. No, it's we've been crushed for so damn long. Now we have the right to walk in our purpose and who we are without being crushed. And if you would just leave us alone, we can live a healthy life, balanced, and no need to attack anyone. But in particularly, this book here, she goes over in detail the different problems that white society faced, in particular the racist white supremacist ideology and all the holes in it. And she goes into how they condition us when it comes to symbols, when it comes to games, when it comes to everything you can name, really. She went over this, and she even debated a man by the name of William Shockley in 1974. I recommend everyone watch.
Well, my theory was, I wrote the paper in 1969. I wrote a paper called The Crest Theory of Color Confrontation and Racism. And the sole reason behind writing that paper was an attempt to understand the behavior of white people in relationship to all people of color, every place in the world, black, brown, red, and yellow people. And the paper was presented to the Americans at the National Medical Association, the section on psychiatry in neurology, because back in 1969, the Black Caucus in the American Psychiatric Association, we had said that racism, and when we talk about racism, we're talking about the white supremacy behavior of white people. That racism was the #1 mental health problem in the nation, and it was the #1 cause of other mental health problems. And I wanted to understand what this thing of racism really is all about, because it's the thing that has caused woe and misery and suffering for the vast majority of the people on this planet that are classified as non-white. And in my attempt to understand why the necessity of white people to keep saying that white is superior and that the condition of non-white is inferior, and the more I thought about it, in conjunction with an idea that a friend of mine had, that racism was a worldwide behavioral system for the maintenance of white supremacy by a small minority of people, I put those ideas together with what we know about genetics, what we know about the condition of skin whiteness itself. The condition of skin whiteness is the genetic inability to produce skin pigment called melanin. This is a genetic recessive trait. It is a genetic deficiency state, not as defined by Francis Welsing, but defined by geneticists and dermatologists, that the inability to produce the skin pigment of melanin or melanin pigment is described as albinism. And I think that white people, even though most white people are not consciously understanding their problem in genetics, they are certainly aware that they are genetically dominated by people of color. That's why it was a statement, one drop of black blood makes you black, because people of color have the genetic capacity to annihilate white people. And so unless white people control the reproductivity of people of color, then we can postulate that perhaps one day there won't be any white people. And I think that the very survival of white people necessitates that they project genetic inferiority on people of color, because it is they who really are aware that they are genetic recessive and perhaps genetically inferior to people of color. And I am not saying this to call the condition of skin whiteness to say, well, no, white people are inferior. I'm not saying it for that purpose, but I think that it is of prime importance for the majority of people in the world to understand why it is that white people have to, the effective majority, large numbers of white people, have to move in a hostile, in an aggressive way against people of color, and have to constantly focus on it's you who's genetically inferior, because they realize that there's something wrong with their genetic status.
This debate right here, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing versus William Shockley. Boy, she had that white man on the ropes, had him running for the hills, because it was so beautiful how she was calm and intellectually dismantled his disgustingly racist dysgenics, is what he called it, dysgenics ideology. It was insane. So again, I'm going to just say this so I can end this part, because there is going to be a part 2. There's so much more that goes into this, because I didn't touch on just so many parts. I don't even want to bring it up right now. I want you to chew on this episode because there is a lot that I went over. I want you to study it. Make sure you commit it to memory, apply it, and have discussions about it, because once you get past this part, which is the history and some of the present time ideological circumstances and in how they use it in policies to affect people in America and the world, then we're going to go into the next part of this, dealing with the money trail, dealing with the drugs, dealing with a whole lot more with psychosurgery and ECT or electroshock, all of that kind of stuff. I'm going to go into that because that's also where it gets even crazier. But until next time, I want everyone to do something here. We have a closed group where I go over not only this data, but I also bring in experts in different fields to educate and arm our people with solutions so they can activate them and apply them ASAP in their life, and a whole lot of other things. And you know, when I hold classes and different things of that nature, each time people pay for each class. But if you join the Free Thinkers Society, you have to go to joinfreethinkers.com, joinfreethinkers.com, joinfreethinkers.com. All the classes come with that, along with the book and the audio book and 2 free tickets to our in-person events and a lot of other things that you get when it comes to joining that. But it is not for you to come in and just say, thank you, Rizza, for doing the work, but I'm not going to get involved. No, it is only if you are serious, and only if you are serious in getting involved yourself. Go to joinfreethinkers.com and also subscribe to RizzaIslam.com. Grab yourself something. Make sure that you help the work, because all this research, all the work that we're doing is only for you. I don't get paid by the government, and I'm happy about that. I'm very happy about that. And I want to keep it that way, which is why we do what we do for you, so that you can be free to think how you need to think. You can be justified and equal with the best in civilized society. So make sure you go to RizzaIslam.com as well. Grab whatever product you feel you can use that can help you, that inspires others. We have our whole natural immunity wins section. Grab all of that you can grab. And also, again, subscribe to RizzaIslam.com. Make sure you share this with a friend, because we're going to be coming out with a whole lot more episodes as we move forward. This has been Rizza Islam from Intellectual Extremists. Peace.